This is the tender story of how my niece and I, who are not blood related, became a true family. My name is Marie, and I'm a 35-year-old housewife. Sean and I met in college and started dating shortly thereafter. After college, I entered the workforce and we got married right before I turned 30. We have one son, Ryder, who had just turned 2 years old. He didn't talk much yet, but he was very curious and into everything. He even started walking before he ever crawled. Sean and I started discussing having a second child. We knew having another baby could be harder this time since we were getting older. My husband is the middle child of 3. He has an older brother, Sam, and younger sister, each 3 years apart from him, who were also married. My brother-in-law and his wife, Linda, had also been trying to get pregnant for a year now. Linda was older than Sam. She had always worked hard to take care of herself and looked very young for her age. She had the mindset that since she looked so great for her age and she felt even younger, so she would eventually be able to get pregnant. However, when she finally turned 40 that year, she became impatient and finally started fertility treatment. I have friends the same age as Linda who were also struggling with fertility treatments. Given that, I was worried about Sam and Linda, who started much later in life. But they had some money saved up, made some good investing decisions, and Sam was a very health-conscious person. He ate organic foods and they belonged to a fancy yoga studio, so I thought their lifestyle would be an advantage for them. All my husband and I could do was to support them. Meanwhile, Sean's younger sister Sue and her husband Richard had a 5-year-old daughter, Layla. Layla's father did his best to play with her, and her mother was gentle but firm when necessary. My niece had grown up to be a wonderful little girl with a bright smile and a lovely personality. She would say, "When I grow up, I'm going to marry my father." She often spoke about the dreams of all the fathers in the world, and she made her dad proud. Layla also loves my son, her cousin Ryder. When we get together, my son exclaims, "My Layla, my Layla!" And he would run up to my niece and be very attached to her. My sister-in-law and her husband were an ideal family, the picture of happiness. But misfortune struck suddenly and without warning. One day, they died most suddenly. They were the victims of a one-sided accident through no fault of their own. The day of the funeral, both sets of their parents sobbed as they clung to the coffins. My niece Layla stood holding hands with my stunned husband. I also found it impossible to stop crying, but their grief was immeasurable. I felt so sorry for my niece, who was staring at the 2 pictures of her deceased parents, not speaking. Tears silently streamed down her cheeks. I wondered if her small mind and body would be able to cope with this level of trauma. As I thought of my Layla's future without her parents, I cried even harder. We had to make sure she had a stable home. My mother-in-law was the only one who stayed at home and was currently undergoing treatment for an illness that kept her in and out of the hospital. Both of Layla's paternal grandparents were disabled and unable to care for anyone else. Layla's uncle, her father's brother, was single and traveled a lot for work. And we had a young son who was still a full-time job. We were not in a situation to be able to devote ourselves to our niece's emotional care. I guess the decision was made in consideration of these circumstances. After the 7th-day memorial service, my mother-in-law stepped aside with Sam and Linda and asked if they could talk privately, but we were also in the same room. "I want you to take Layla with you." My brother-in-law, Sam, who adored my niece, seemed inclined to accept it, but however, his wife, Linda, suddenly bared her emotions.
"What do you mean? You want us to take her when we are trying to have our own child?"
My sister-in-law had never expressed this kind of intensity to any of us. My mother-in-law flinched.
"Well, it's not like that, but you're going to be 40, right? I can't keep paying for your fertility treatment. Layla is a very good girl. That's why."
"This is a terrible thing to ask. You said you would support us, but now you are breaking your promise," she ranted,
her eyes bloodshot. My sister-in-law, who was always dressed nicely and sat with a twinkle in her eye, was a mere memory. I could not hide my surprise at the fact that my mother-in-law was paying for her fertility treatment. I thought they both were working and earning money. How could they ask my mother-in-law to support them? Where is she spending her money?
No, you see,
My mother-in-law tried her best to ease the tension, but the damage had already been done. My sister-in-law erupted like an active volcano.
I don't want someone else's child, much less the child of a couple who didn't have an education or good jobs. I want a child of my own blood, a good child.
The room fell silent. "Hey!" Sam shouted as he hurriedly pulled her arm to restrain her outburst, but she refused to back down and glared daggers at my mother-in-law. She seemed so selfish in that moment. It was all too much. I was filled with rage at her words and actions. Layla was sitting still, staring blankly at the pictures of her parents. Although I could not see her face from behind, she must have known, even at a young age, that she was being treated like an intruder, and that her parents were being vilified. I didn't want this child to have to carry anything more on her tiny shoulders. It would be unthinkable to entrust my child to such a heartless woman. There was only one way to protect Layla. I made up my mind. We will take Layla.
Marie!
My mother-in-law looked at me in surprise. My husband also looked anxious at my decision. I agree, but I'm also worried. It's you who will have the hardest time with another child at home. I understand, but I won't give up. I looked into his eyes earnestly.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My mother-in-law bowed to me repeatedly as if she were about to drop to her knees.
I won't be made to sit here and look like the bad guy. Let's go home.
Linda continued to glare at us while grabbing Sam's arm and quickly headed for the door. Sam glanced at us sullenly and followed her out without a word. I sat down next to Layla and said in the kindest voice I could, "Come to our house. We want you to live with us." She replied quietly,
I don't want to be a bother.
"No, it's not like that. We want you to come." My chest tightened at the sight of this small child who knew her place. At that moment, my son, who was playing with the toy car in the corner of the room, walked up to me.
My Layla! My Layla!
My son took Layla's hand. They loved each other so much. "Ryder, Layla is going to be your big sister from now on."
Layla, really? Are you my sister?
"Yes, big sister." My son nodded his head, clearly wondering what big sister meant. But we could tell that he understood that big sister was a very nice thing.
My big sissy Layla.
Ryder squeezed Layla tightly, and the joy resonated in the room. My brother. Layla looked up at my husband and me with confusion. "Nice to meet you, big sister Layla." I beamed at her, and her face crumpled into a joyful cry. Then she hugged my son's body and sobbed, her little shoulders shaking. I held back tears myself and decided right then and there that I would protect this little girl for the rest of her life. From that day on, Layla was part of our family. She was a very good girl. She worked hard, did well in kindergarten, and even helped out at home. But she didn't smile much, and it was painful to see her have to fight so hard through her grief to find a new place in this world. The trauma and grief of her loss would manifest in sudden night terrors, crying, and potty accidents in the middle of the night. As I stroked her little back as she cried in the dark, wondering if I could ever help get her to a place of healing. It was during times like this that Ryder would often come to our rescue. He would say,
Layla, sissy, let's play,
and followed Layla all around the house. He showed his love to her, and always seeking Layla's tenderness, he seemed to fill a void for her that no one else could. At first, she just obediently played with him, but little by little, they settled into a true sister-brother bond, arguing over toys and sternly correcting him when he misbehaved. As parents, we felt spoiled by this sweet little girl. She was always thinking of others and willing to help out. She was never selfish.
"Could we have curry for dinner?" she would ask.
It was a small request, but I was happy to hear her express her needs and preferences. Sean and I raised Layla like our own, and my mother-in-law supported us as much as she could. Finally, 2 years after Layla came to live with us, I started thinking about getting pregnant again. Of course, I was worried. What would another baby do to Layla's progress and healing? I was very worried. But if I gave up on another pregnancy only because of Layla, that wouldn't be right either. No matter which path I chose, I was sure I would have regrets and difficulties. Then I realized that we only have one life, and I wanted to live a life with no regrets. My husband and I decided to start trying, and we became pregnant. Finally, after several weeks of anxiety, once I felt it was safe to reveal, I told Layla, "We're going to have another baby, big sister Layla." Her eyes widened momentarily, surprised at my words. Then, after a brief pause, she smiled and happily snuggled into my belly. I loved the way she looked at me, and as I stroked Layla's head, we both thought of baby names. One day, without warning, my sister-in-law, Linda, showed up at our house. It felt like the arrival of a curse. She barged through the door and slammed it. Then she took one look at my growing belly and blatantly scowled. "Oh no, you really are pregnant." My mother-in-law had probably told her about my pregnancy. I wondered if she had come all the way here just to confirm it. "How can you take in a child who's not related to you and then have another baby? You have no common sense. I feel sorry for all these children you're raising." The way she just showed up to pick a fight with me made me so angry. What did she know about our family when she hadn't had any contact with us for the past 2 years? "We are happy. We want this baby." "Oh, no, you can't do that. It's harder than you think raising 3 kids, not to mention one that's not even yours." "This is our life. Why are you here?" "I'll take your baby." "What?" I had no idea what she was talking about. A few minutes ago, she was ranting about how children were so much trouble. "I can't continue with fertility treatments anymore, so I'll take your child." What? What is this person saying? I began to shake with anger. "There is no way I would give him to you. Don't act like you are offering to do me a favor." "Oh, no. Is it a boy again? You're so bad at this. Boys are so violent. I'd rather have a girl." "What?" "Then it can't be helped. That girl, Layla, right? I'll take her instead." I was astonished. First, the thought of insulting me, my parenting, and my pregnancy. Then, demanding this child after refusing to take her in 2 years ago. Now, after all this time, you want to take Layla back. Absolutely not. You're crazy. She belongs with us. That child has gone through so much, and we are her home now. We took Layla in, and she's not a possession to be passed around. We are responsible for raising her to the end. I refused. "What, you're going to act like her mother after raising her for only 2 years? I won't just hand her off to someone who mocks the 2 years she suffered and thinks of her as if she were an object." "You have 3 children. Don't be greedy and give me one." "Why would I give her to you?" She was irritated and stomped her feet in frustration, as if she had expected me to just hand her over willingly. At that moment, the doorbell rang. At the same time, a man's voice comes from the other side of the door. It's her husband, my brother-in-law, Sam. "Hey, you're here, aren't you?" Give me a break." Sam opened the door with great force. Suddenly, Linda's face turned pale, and she bolted out the door. Sam narrowly managed to avoid colliding with her, and he said suddenly to me, "I'm sorry. I'll tell you what happened later." He then took off after her. I sat down on the spot as if the tension in my body had just been broken. Layla and Ryder, who had been hiding in the living room, approached me fearfully. "Kids, listen."
"Mom, Layla isn't going anywhere, is she?" She's my big sister. She always will be, right?
My son looked up at me anxiously. Of course, Layla is our family. I patted their heads, and Layla opened her mouth to speak.
Am I allowed to stay here?
The same question as 2 years ago. At that time, to be honest, a large part of me took her in out of pity. But now, she is my daughter. She completed a part of our family we didn't even know was missing. I want you to stay here forever. I spoke to her from the bottom of my heart. Layla, who looked like she was about to cry, responded with her best smile.
Yeah.
I gathered both children into my arms and squeezed them joyfully. The touch of my children in my arms warmed my heart, and I could feel my son in my belly moving happily. A few days after Linda's visit, Sam and my mother-in-law came to apologize for her behavior, and then shared a shocking secret. Linda had been having an affair. Apparently, she had been trying for over a year to have a baby with a married man in her office who already had a child, because she was exhausted with fertility treatments and their lack of results. She chose this man not only because she liked his face, but also because he had a seemingly successful track record of having children. However, her plan backfired. Sam found out about the affair, had filed for divorce, and demanded alimony. She wanted to escape both alimony and divorce, and she thought that as long as she had a child somehow, some way, she could absolve herself. It's ridiculous and appalling, but it seems that she was in a panic and couldn't think straight. However, she was determined. It was during the confrontation between her and her husband that she fled to our home, demanding what she thought would be a quick fix. I could not believe she thought such a backwards demand would fix her situation. There was a time in our lives when I thought Linda was a more thoughtful person. How shallow and selfish. I am so glad there was no chance of Layla going with her. Naturally, Sam and Linda divorced. Linda was charged with alimony not only by Sam, but also the wife of the man with whom she had had an affair, and she was accused of cheating within her company, which made her a pariah at work. She's already in her mid-40s. She will have to continue to pay back the alimony alone for the rest of her miserable life. On the other hand, we decided to legally adopt Layla as a result of this incident. I was worried that it would feel like we were taking her from her real parents, but since they had died, I wanted to be able to protect her at all costs and keep her with us legally, forever. But most of all, I wanted to be Layla's legal mother. Eventually, Layla herself started referring to her late mother as Mom, and me as Mama. We slowly grew our relationship to become like a real mother and daughter. Today is my daughter Layla's coming-of-age ceremony. On this once-in-a-lifetime occasion, she asked me to wear my special red long-sleeved kimono. I suggested that she rent a modern kimono, but she said without hesitation, "Mama, I want to wear your kimono." She was adamant. My daughter dressed up in my kimono by arranging it prettily with accessories in a modern style. On the way to the venue of the ceremony with Layla, we were approached by a stranger who was on a walk. "Ah, it must be your coming-of-age ceremony. You are so beautiful, and you look just like your mother." We looked at each other and laughed. I don't know how many times I've been told that Layla looks and behaves just like me since she started high school. It is strange, isn't it? Though we're not related by blood. When I said this, Layla shook her head. "It's only natural that we look alike. My mama praised me, disciplined me, fed me, and loved me. This body of mine is made with a lot of love for my mama and dad." Oh, Layla. When I lost my real mom and dad as a young child, it was really painful. There were times when I resented them, wishing they had taken me with them. But now I'm glad to be alive, glad to be an adult, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Mama, for bringing me into this family. Thank you for being my mama. Tears and various emotions welled up in my heart as my daughter smiled beautifully at me saying these words.
thank you for being my daughter.
Oh no, don't cry, Mother.
Because
I've been on the road since 5 in the morning, and I've had my makeup professionally done.
My teary-eyed daughter laughed in astonishment and held out a handkerchief to me.
it has been a beautiful 15 years.
There were days when we butted heads, didn't agree, and had heated arguments, but that's a natural part of being a parent and child. This year, Layla will graduate from a vocational school and enter the workforce. A parent's job is to make sure that a child grows up to be an adult who no longer needs them. And I have done my job. It is bittersweet, though, because Layla's presence has made my life better.
Mama, even though I'm grown, I will still need you. Always. Of course, you are my precious daughter.
Regardless of how we came to be a family, we will always be just that. Family.